Dr. Anas Atukite, our esteemed guest, Executive Director of Peer Institute, YB Zarul Kajari, and my friend and colleague, Dr. Azmi Sharom. I would like to welcome all of you over here this Saturday morning. We're going to discuss about a very important topic about this, what is understood by freedom of religion, basically. So as perhaps we all understand that since this country is used to hold a chair at the United Nations Human Rights Council and is eyeing for the Security Council as well, and we're part of the United Nations, and one of the most important things, as mentioned by YB Zara just now, is that we adhere to what is known as human rights, right? And what was very unfortunate was the statement by the Prime Minister recently attacking human rights and religious liberty. And I think, as pointed out by Julia just now about Article 18 of the United Nations Human Rights, Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, it stated very clearly about the freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. And that is very fundamental to us, right? So we're living in a state where, you know, this fundamental value is under attack. And we have people of different faith in this forum, even from different denominations in Islam as well. So where do we go about from here, right? When the Prime Minister himself doesn't believe in what is known as human rights. So this is the main issue that we're going to discuss today. So without further ado, I'd like to invite my best friend, Dr. Azmi Sharom, to share his thoughts about this.
Thank you. I'll go stand up. Before I start, I just wanted to say that I've been working with the Islamic Renaissance Front now for about a year, speaking at things like this, and I've come to know Farouk very well, and I think it's important at this stage of our history in this country to realize just how important bodies like the IRF is. In the face of extremism, in the face of bigotry, in the face of prejudice, in the face of wickedness, where else can we turn to? We need the IRF, we need bodies like this, because there's no one else who's going to stand up against those who are intent on destroying us. And as dramatic as that sounds, I'm quite certain with all my heart that it's true. So let's keep on trucking, as they say. Right. The politics of religious liberty. Danny, what are you doing? Oh, good Lord. Right, okay, the politics of religious liberty. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of how religious liberty is related to politics. Now, religion and politics, I think as soon as religion was invented, politics was also there, or the other way around. It's related. It's extremely interrelated. And I want to tell you a story because about which might sound very odd, but it has relevance. I was fortunate enough to be in Belfast late last year. I was speaking at a discussion, a seminar on the intra-religious conflicts at Queen's University Belfast, which is why I could go so far. I am a lecturer. I cannot afford on my own pay to go to Europe, but you know, someone else was paying for me. Great. So in Belfast, there are many interesting things in that city. The occasional gunshot being part of it, but also if you wander around that city, you'll see a lot of murals, a lot of expressions are done via paintings on walls. And the expressions are Catholic expressions and Protestant expressions. It's sectarian. The murals are sectarian in nature. Right? So if you are in a Catholic area of town, you will see murals depicting their values, their beliefs, etc. Or if you're a Protestant side of town, you'll see that. And amidst, so we were in this Protestant part of town, and amidst sort of like memorials to their fallen heroes. And I use the term loosely, yeah, but we're talking in that context. There are often murals of this rather effeminate-looking man in a wig, in a horse, in a hat. And I was wondering, who is this, old-fashioned 17th century or even 16th century, 17th century person, and it turns out to be that's William of Orange. And he's deemed as a great hero for Protestants in Ireland. Who's William of Orange? William of Orange is a Dutch man, or royal blood, I presume, who became King of England after James II was basically chased away. Why was James II chased away? Because James II, who was Catholic. And as you all know, there was always been a tension between the Protestants and Catholics in England, stemming from Henry VIII. Well, it's of course I've always found English Anglicanism rather amusing, because the foundations of it is rather amusing. I mean, it's not a philosophical difference. It's, I want to marry this woman. Why don't you let me marry this woman? So I'm going to break away from you. So my Anglican friends are always a little bit embarrassed, because the foundations of their faith is a little bit naughty, I think. But anyway, so there's always been this tension between the two. And William of Orange came in, swooping in. James II, the Catholic, the horrible Catholic popery, and he was sent off to France. And so William is the great hero for Protestants. And that is the image that was projected, that this is a warrior for the Protestant faith. The fact that William did not want Holland to be threatened by another Catholic power, because already there was France. And if England became Catholic, then you would have these two Catholic forces, and Holland would be under threat. I mean, that was the real reason why he came to England and helped to take over and, help be part of the whole process which ousted James II. It wasn't really about faith. It was about politics. It was about power. It was about maintaining the Protestant power versus the Catholic power. The Catholic power represented that time primarily by France. So we can see there that this relationship between religion and politics it's there, and it's been there for the longest time. Now, how about Malaysia? How about over here? And I'm going to be my usual Malaysian katak bawah tempurung self. I'm just going to talk about my own country now. That was my bid towards internationalism. Done, finish. So, well, over here, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but religion and politics weren't really that closely related until the 80s. Yeah, we already had PAS, who incidentally was the stepchild of UMNO, yeah, because UMNO created PAS. By creating their religious wing, their religious division, who after not very long realized that their bigger political masters were not very religious at all, so they left and created PAS. But so, it wasn't until the 80s that this whole idea that religiosity had to play a much bigger role in politics. And that was the period of where Islam was facing a resurgence. There was a greater expression of one's faith in public, largely driven by the influence of the Iranian Revolution. And so it suddenly became a big thing, and PAS was the primary threat to UMNO power. So how did they deal with this? Well, they dealt with this by saying, we are just as religious as you, right? And I think everybody here knows that. And thus began the political game of I'm more Muslim than you. Anything Islamic you can do, I can do better. There should be a song. We should have a musical. It's Islamic politics in Malaysia, the musical. And what this led to, in my point of view, was a greater amount of power being given to the religious authorities. The Jais, the Jawis, the Jakims, and all these bodies, because the ruling powers that be wanted to appear as religious or even more religious than past, because that it became a political agenda. Now, this is not unusual in our context. If we go back to the last century, in the early part of the last century, and there was already a schism between ideologies. Yeah, you had the kaum tua and the kaum muda. The kaum muda being the more progressive, and the kaum tua being the conservative elements of Islamic thought in this country. Excuse me, forgive me. And there were many, and this schism between these two schools of thoughts, which ultimately was won by the kaum tua, reflects, I think, something which is happening today, right? I think, Farouk, you are like kaum muda, yeah? You're so youthful. But the kaum tua ultimately won out, and why is that? Partly because I think, literacy wasn't as strong in those days in this country. Access to reading materials, it was limited. It was freer. It was freer. They didn't have the Printing and Presses Publications Act, okay, but nonetheless, it was harder to spread the message further out. So they didn't have internet and things like that. So the kaum muda depended very much on it. It was very much an intellectual movement. They depended very much on newspapers, magazines, etc. So it's very difficult to get that out. But also the kaum tua associated themselves with the ruling powers. In this case, being the sultans. So they associated themselves with the traditional feudalistic power base, and this helped them. This helped their cause, and it helped the cause of the status quo. It helped the cause of the sultans as well. So my point being that the relationship between religious authorities and political power players is also a common thing. All right, and so and with that context, we see, I think, in this country from the 80s onwards, that kind of relationship becoming very strong, where the political power holders and the religious authorities work together. And of course, the role that these authorities play was very useful for the political powers that be, because for one thing, they advocated certain ideas which any ruling party, any ruling government would enjoy and would love. For example, obedience. There's nothing a government likes better than obedience. Disobedience is awful, but obedience, yeah, it's a great thing, right? And Zairil touched on this, the suppression of intellectualism in the name of faith, in the name of protecting faith. So things like books were banned, and so if you don't have an ability to question, if you do not have the necessary environment with which questioning is okay, then this spreads. If you don't question this person, you'll not question that person. It's part of the whole ethos and the whole mindset, which is so useful to any political power wanting to remain in power, when you have an unquestioning populace. And here, unfortunately, I do not like to raise ethnicity, but unfortunately, we are talking about Malay people, which is why so many Malay books are banned, as opposed to English books, because, of course, Malay people cannot read English. They say they support Malays, but they're so insulting. And films, okay, the latest one was Noah, the banning of Noah, right? Now, if I wouldn't watch Noah, because Russell Crowe is an awful actor, really. After Gladiator, he's done nothing of any worth, all right? But, no, that was awful. That was awful. It was, yeah. Intelligent young people like this fancy themselves to be, Nash and brilliant and genius, but no. But I remember when I was a schoolboy in Penang, my ustaz was from Jalan Kelawai. And my late ustaz, bless him. And I remember him coming to class one day and he says, "Hey, boys, at Rex Cinema," which is now a clothes store, I'm afraid to say. "At Rex Cinema, they're showing the 10 Commandments again with Charlton Heston. It's very good. You should go and watch it. It's about Nabi Musa." You know, that was the kind of, relaxed, laid backness that we, and he could appreciate. Look, the basic story is the same. You have the burning bush, you have the cane turning into a snake, all those kind of things. And he says, "Yeah, boys, it's good. You should go and watch it." I watched it. That was my ustaz. And this was in the 80s. It wasn't that long ago. And now they're saying, "Oh, if you watch this, your faith will be spoiled, everything will be..." No, come on. And it's this kind of suppression of any sort of expanding of the mind, even with something as frivolous as a movie, is what's happening now. And so, and therefore, as the years go by, the political masters find that, hey, it's good to have the religious masters on our side. And so greater and greater influence. They have greater and greater influence. The laws become more and more awful. The family laws, for example, the Islamic family laws, in the past was a lot better than it is today. When they revamped the entire Islamic family laws, for example, the issue of polygamy, whereas before you had to show necessity and justness before you are allowed to marry a second wife, now it's either one. You don't have to show both, right? And it's so much easier. So the issue of women's rights, right, were given a back seat to paternalism and a paternalistic attitude. And this didn't happen in the 60s, 70s, or 80s even. This happened recently. All right? And so you can see this conservatism becoming more and more powerful in our whole makeup. And of course, they don't want to let go of this, is because they like this kind of thing. And the political powers, I mean, they like this kind of things. And because the religious authorities are so conservative, we have the suppression of religious liberty, because that is their attitude. But it's too late now for the government to do anything about it. Even if they did, all right? Even if the government of the day feels like, hold on, there's, we have Article 11 of the Constitution, etc. We must protect religious liberty. Even if they wanted to, it's too late now. They have to associated themselves too closely to the religious authorities. They have associated themselves too closely to a supposed Islamic religiosity. They cannot back down anymore. Because to back down would now mean to be un-Islamic. All right? So we are left in a situation where the political institution, we cannot curb anymore the religious persecution or the loss of religious liberty, which is pushed primarily by the religious authorities. And it just gets worse and worse, as recently reflected by our wonderful Prime Minister and his human rightism. He disappears for ages, right? And then he appears suddenly and he says the most ridiculous things. It's like a jack in a box. You don't know when he's going to come, but when he comes out with nothing. But anyway, so just let me remind you that under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the aspiration for human rights, the reason why we have human rights is stated in the preamble, and the reason why the aspiration for human rights is because we all deserve to live in a world where we have freedom of expression and belief, and freedom from want, and freedom from fear. What is so deviationist about those aspirations? And as far as I can see right now, religion is being used as a distraction from real political issues. You raise all these things, and you just get a group of people to make enough noise, to be threatening enough, and then everybody is thinking about these things rather than thinking about other things. For example, the state of our economy, how much longer do we have Petronas oil? Is the GST really going to mess us up? If we have free trade, is it going to help us at all? What about the state of our schools? What about the states of our universities? The poor university lecturers are paid so poorly. Could we do something about them? No, nobody discusses these things because everybody is discussing about hudud and everybody is discussing about the Christian threat. The most powerful people in the world, as far as I can see, are Christians. Because over here, they're only 6% of the population, and yet they can threaten 60% of the population. All right, that's incredible stuff, man. That's Bruce Lee kind of fighting skills. All right, things like this. So you have all this, and of course in Malaysia, because Islam and Malay is so interrelated, you could have within one sentence a skip from Islam is being under threat to Malays are being under threat. So it becomes religious, and then it becomes racial, and then the racial language becomes more and more racist and prejudice. And the thing about these people, these groups and who appear like mushrooms after the rain, they're so small-minded. If I was to take Isma and the ustazas and all the rest of it, if I was to bring them to England, and if I was to bring them to a meeting of UKIP, right, the UKIP meeting, and hear the kind of same racist rubbish being spouted by these people over there and being aimed at people like us because they are Islamic phobic, right? If I was to bring them there, I can guarantee you, they will say, oh, this is an example of how evil Christians are. They will not say, this is an example of how evil bigotry is, and we don't want to be bigots either. Because that's how small-minded they are. And that's the situation we have today. We have a situation where, because of the relationship of politics and religious authorities, religious liberty is curtailed, political development is curtailed, democracy is curtailed. And that's what we're fighting against. And that's what we have to break away from. Thank you very much.